Good morning. Well, it does seem like we might only have two more posts, this one and one more, on the book of Acts. And we started this in late June, and we're almost done with the book of Acts, just walking through the book of Acts, the Acts of the Apostles, the Acts of the early church, the Acts of the Holy Spirit. And we've seen the gospel spread. So we come to Acts 27, and it's a long chapter. I'm probably going to read through it without much comment. We'll see. But it's a lot of travel. So Paul is sent to Rome. When it was decided that we would sail for Italy, they proceeded to deliver Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius. Now remember, Paul's been prisoner. Paul appealed to Caesar, so that's why he's on his way to Italy. And embarking in an Adramyttian ship, which was about to sail to the regions along the coast of Asia, we put out to sea, accompanied by Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica. By the way, it still says we. So it seems like Luke is still traveling, even though Luke's not a prisoner. Maybe Luke's paying his own way, but he's still traveling with Paul. Now, Luke is likely doing all of this just as research, to research and study and write this book of Acts. Verse 3. The next day, we put in at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul with consideration, allowed him to go to his friends and receive care. Now, that's very nice. Notice that extra detail. Paul was able to go to his friends and receive care. From there, we put out to sea and sailed under the shelter of Cyprus, because the winds were contrary. When we had sailed through the sea along the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we landed at Myra and Lycia. There the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing for Italy, and he put us aboard it. Then we had sailed slowly for a good when we had sailed slowly for a good many days, and with difficulty had arrived at Cnidus, since the wind did not permit us to go further, we sailed under the shelter of Crete off Salmone. And with difficulty, sailing past it, we came to a place called Fair Havens, near which was the city of Lasea. When considerable time had passed, and the voyage was now dangerous, since even the fast was already over, Paul began to admonish them. So even the fast was already over. The fast in this case is Day of Atonement in September or October, which was a dangerous time of year for navigation. So that gives a little about the season. So Paul began to admonish them, saying, and he said to them, Men, I perceive that the voyage will certainly be with damage and great loss, not only of the cargo and the ship, but also of our lives. But the centurion was more persuaded by the pilot and the captain of the ship than by what was being said by Paul. Now Paul's being very prophetic here. Because the harbor was not suitable for wintering, the majority reached a decision to put out to sea from there. If somehow they could reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete, facing southwest and northwest, and spend the winter there. They have to spend the winter. When a moderate south wind came up, supposing that they had attained their purpose, they weighed anchor and began sailing along Crete, also inshore. But before very long, there rushed down from there the land a violent wind called a Eurykilo. It's basically it means a northeaster. In the New American Standard Bible, the NASB I read from is very literal, so it's using this weird word Eurykilo, but it's a northeaster. When the ship was caught in it and could not face the wind, we gave way to it and let ourselves be driven along. Running under the shelter of a small island called Clauda, we were scarcely able to get the ship's boat under control. After they had hoisted it up, they used supporting cables to undergirding the ship, and fearing that they might run aground on the shallows of Syrtis, they let down the sea anchor, and in this way let themselves be driven along. Next day, as we were being violently storm-tossed, they began to jettison the cargo. And on the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. So they're throwing stuff overboard, getting rid of cargo. Since neither sun nor stars, verse 20, since neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small storm was assailing us, from then on, all hope of our being saved was gradually abandoned. They're starting thinking this is the end. When they had gone a long time without food, then Paul stood up in their midst and said, Men, you ought to have followed my advice and not have to set sail from Crete and incurred this damage and loss. Yet now I urge you to keep up your courage, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. So he's still being prophetic. They will live, but the ship will not be savable. For this very night, an angel of God, verse 23, for this very night, an angel of God, the angel of the God to whom I belong, and whom I serve, stood before me, saying, Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar, and behold, God has granted you all those who are sailing with you. So an angel had told Paul, they'll live. Therefore keep up your courage, men, for I believe God that it will turn out exactly as I have been told. But we must run aground on a certain island. But when the 14th night came, as we were being driven about in the Adriatic Sea, about midnight, the sailors began to surmise that they were approaching some land. They took soundings and found it to be 20 fathoms, and a little further on they took another sounding and found it to be 15 fathoms. Fearing that we might run aground somewhere on the rocks, they cast 4 anchors in the stern and wished for daybreak. But as the sailors were trying to escape from the ship and had let down the ship's boat into the sea on the pretense of intending to lay out anchors from the bow, Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, "Unless these men remain in the ship, you yourselves cannot be saved." Another prophetic voice. Then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the ship's boat and let it fall away. Until the day was about to dawn, Paul was encouraging them all to take some food, saying, "Today is the 14th day that you have been constantly watching and going without eating, having taken nothing." So they've been going through rough seas, it seems like, for 14 days without eating. Paul continues, "Therefore I encourage you to take some food, for this is for your preservation. For not a hair from the head of any of you will perish." Having said this, he took bread and gave thanks to God in the presence of all, and he broke it and began to eat. All of them were encouraged, and they themselves also took food. All of us in the ship, now notice he's using that word us, Luke is with them, all of us in the ship were 276 persons. 276 persons. When they'd eaten enough, they began to lighten the ship by throwing out the wheat into the sea. When day came, they could not recognize the land, but they did observe a bay with a beach, and they resolved to drive the ship into it if they could. And casting off the anchors, they left them in the sea, while at the same time they were loosening the ropes of the rudders and hoisting the foresail to the wind. They were heading for the beach. But striking a reef where 2 seas met, they ran the vessel aground, and the prow stuck fast and remained immovable. But the stern, and now it says prow, I'm thinking it means something similar to bow, but the stern began to be broken up by the force of the waves. The soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners, so that none of them would swim away and escape. They were just going to kill the prisoners. But the centurion, wanting to bring Paul safely through, kept them from their intention, and commanded that those who could swim should jump overboard first and get to land. And the rest should follow, some on planks and others on various things from the ship. So it happened that they all were brought safely to land. So now they're at Malta and they're safely at land, and we have one more chapter of the book of Acts, which we'll get to hopefully tomorrow or late tonight. But we see how God is taking care of Paul and Luke, really in this case as well, and others, bringing the gospel to Rome. And we're going to see some miracles in Malta as we get into chapter 20. I hope this encourages your walk with the Lord. Have an awesome day in the Lord.